It's August the 2nd of 2010. We're in Washington, D.C. And the worst part of D.C. is an area known as the 7th Ward. The 7th Ward is high crime. It is violent. It is drug dealers.
All right, bye, Keisha.
Bye.
Bye.
Letitia Frazier, she's 18 years old. She's a fry cook in a McDonald's in the 7th Ward. Letitia's mother and her sister are waiting for Letitia to come home.
So it was planned that everybody would meet up, and she's supposed to be there, but she didn't show up. And we calling and calling, phone just going straight to voicemail. It was too many signs that just wasn't normal.
Developing in the district tonight.
Letitia Frazier disappeared.
After leaving her job at McDonald's.
Letitia Frazier went missing last summer.
Classified this as a critical missing person.
The fact that my little sister is missing is a stressful situation.
Police have not yet recovered a body.
That's what I feel, truthfully, that it's foul play.
Where is Letitia? No one seems to know.
Jackie Middleton, Parker.
I joined the Metropolitan Police Department in October of 1986. It's every officer's desire to become a detective, the top tier. A homicide detective gets to investigate the most heinous crime there is. You get to hunt the beast.
Jackie Middleton is a great detective, and Jackie was great because of her rapport with people. She can calm people. She was passionate. She knew how to turn a switch off and on when it was needed, and she could be tough.
At the time, I had transferred from homicide and was working in the 7th District.
Middleton.
Jackie Middleton was a well-experienced missing persons investigator and a well-experienced homicide detective. She's summoned to the front lobby of the precinct building to meet Letitia's mother and her sister and the father.
You have kids.
Don't give me somebody that can help me.
Fill out the paperwork first.
Our daughter.
Yo, he's the one that help, man.
Okay, look, I understand.
Hey,
we got you.
Hey.
So I spoke with the family, and they were complaining about Letitia being missing.
They are more than alarmed. They need help to find their loved one. And the most obvious place to look for the help is the police department.
Y'all come with me. Y'all come on to the back. I'll help you find your daughter. Yo, come on. Come on back.
And that was the beginning of the relationship between the Campbell Fraziers and myself.
So we sat down and Jackie talked to us. She kind of calmed us down and, made us feel comfortable about them looking into our daughter's case.
First question we always ask is, has she ever ran away?
We say no, she never ran away, because that's not Tisha, Tisha always came home when she got off work and did what she had to do for Diamond and everything.
Who's Diamond?
Tisha's daughter.
I'ma get you.
Letitia left behind a daughter, Diamond, who was 3 at the time.
Oh, Diamond. Her and her mother was like a team. Only time she wasn't with her mother is when her mother was at work or school. But outside of that, they was together all the time, hooked to her hip.
When you're the mother of a small child, you come home to care for that child. If she's not home, it's because she can't come home. Nobody leaves a child behind. Nobody.
No, something's definitely happened.
Okay, listen, guys, we'll find her.
The concern is that she's not missing, but she's been harmed in some way.
I treated this case as if it was a murder from the very beginning.
Thank you.
We've got to proceed quickly to find out where this girl is. The longer she's missing, the more danger she's in.
And so first thing that I thought we needed to do was speak to the last person who saw her.
So Middleton goes to the McDonald's, speaks to the manager.
We wanted to find out if she had any problems with anyone on the job. Were there any customers she was having issues with?
Letitia, she's one of my best employees.
They all like Letitia. They admire her for her willingness to advance herself.
She worked hard. Once she graduated high school, she wound up working for McDonald's, and also she was getting her culinary arts degree. She loved cooking, so I know being a chef was one of her things that she wanted to do eventually.
Did Letitia have any problems here last night?
Nothing I can think of.
Nothing that's out of the ordinary. One coworker sees her leave to go to the bus as is usual.
So we received information that she got on the P bus, which is the bus that she rode home all the time.
Detective Middleton, Metro PD.
So Middleton identifies the driver on duty that night.
Yeah, I just wonder, have you seen this girl?
Yeah, she rides this bus all the time.
Do you remember seeing her last night?
The bus driver says that she was with a man. Now, that's interesting. So who was this man? Middleton goes back to the family with the description provided by the bus driver, and the mother immediately says, oh, that's her boyfriend, Rynell Mills, and then he rides the bus with her sometimes.
How's the word?
They will always be together. They kind of like grew up together.
Something goes wrong between people that are romantically involved. It can be a very emotional and thus a very dangerous thing.
Historically, when you have cases like this, it's the boyfriend or the husband.
That's the first person you're going to look at. Probably 9.5 times out of 10, it is that person.
So Middleton finds her boyfriend. He's also very concerned because this is out of character for Letitia to not make contact.
I need you to tell me about the meetup with Letitia on the bus.
After work, she normally get on the bus with me, ride the bus every day.
Apparently, he had met her coming from work. She said she was going to meet some friends. She got off in the area of 22nd Street, and he continued to go home.
It is her custom to call him every night to say that she got home safely. But that night of August 2nd, she never called.
Are you willing to take a polygraph test?
Yes.
I am not the person that did the polygraph. The polygrapher views the case, and they ask questions about, when's the last time they saw them? Do you know what happened? Did you cause the disappearance? Things of those nature. There was no deception. There was nothing that raised the radar that this is our guy. We did verify this story, so things were lining up.
Can you think of anybody who may know where Letitia is?
Did you talk to Marcus?
Who's Marcus?
Diamond's daddy.
He is the biological father of Diamond. He thus becomes a suspect.
All right, somebody, daddy.
Even if the father is not dating her at the time, there's going to be disputes because the child is involved. So as a detective, you most definitely want to first start there.
So Marcus, what have you been doing? Let's go ask him. Middleton's interview with Letitia's boyfriend yields the identity of someone else, the father of Letitia's child, Diamond. So Middleton needs to find Marcus and see what explanation he has for the disappearance of Letitia Frazier.
We went to his house, and he was interviewed.
Marcus, so what was your relationship with Letitia like?
It was fine.
They were trying to co-parent. They're children. They had this baby when they were like 15 and 16 years old, so they're doing the best they can.
Were y'all having any problems over Diamond or anything like that?
Nah, everything was cool.
He's very cooperative and willing to submit to any testing whatsoever.
We were able to get him to take a polygraph.
And he passed that with flying colors.
We talked to a lot of people. We couldn't find anybody to say that it was volatile or there was any issues or that he would have done anything to her.
So Middleton has no reason to believe that he has anything to do with her disappearance. Good for him.
So after we ruled out the obvious, we started looking to people that she trusted. Her boyfriend said she got off the bus, communicated that she was going to stop and see some friends. So naturally, we want to talk to these kids that she was supposed to be going to see.
Middleton has determined a group of friends exist. They listen to music, they play video games, they all like Letitia, they're all friendly with her. They are Brian Gaither, Johnny Sweet, and Lainey Bell.
Did you guys see Letitia the night she disappeared?
No, she never showed up.
And of course, nobody didn't see her. She never made it to the apartment.
So, Letitia, was she having any problems with anybody?
No, Tisha was cool with everybody.
She was never involved in, craziness. She loved to have fun, always kept a smile on her face. Even at a moment where she might be hurting, she's still smiling.
Everybody said that Letitia Frazier lit up a room.
She just smiled all the time, and she was really friendly to people, and they gravitated to that.
Tisha had her stuff together, man.
This don't make sense.
Everybody painted her to be a very genuine, nice, caring, responsible young lady.
All Middleton has learned is how concerned everyone is, but nobody really has any knowledge. Letitia has vanished, and no one seems to know how that might have happened. In a case like this, what makes it even more difficult, you have a 4-year-old child who wants to know where her mother is, and you can't tell her. You'd love to be able to, but you cannot.
There's a lot of emotional things start going on within her. You want to help, but you really can't. But she's missing that void. I know that took a toll on her.
The longer it takes to find her, the less likely it becomes that she will be found unharmed. Someone has done something awful to Letitia Frazier.
So if we started interviewing people in the neighborhood.
Cameras in the neighborhood is very important.
Hey, guys.
Because you never know who may have seen something.
Just want to know if you've seen this girl.
In a neighborhood like the 7th Ward, the code of silence is a problem. Never tell the police anything.
The 7th District is probably the roughest area of D.C. It's where the most violent calls come from. Majority of your shootings, majority of your homicides.
There's always been a lot of violence in that particular community, and people don't talk to the police.
There is a concern of being retaliated against for cooperating with law enforcement.
You don't want to get involved with the police. You don't want to bring any light to yourself, so you just say you don't know.
So we started posting flyers in the area that she kind of frequently hung around.
We stood out on the streets passing flyers to people in their cars, people walking the street.
We was all over. We was just throwing them around, putting them up everywhere.
Flyers would tear off phone numbers to Crime Stoppers. Anonymous reporting of information. You can even get a reward, and no one's going to ask your name.
But very shortly after we started putting them up, people would snatch them down.
Every day we would post flyers and we'll come back the next day, they all would be gone. It didn't make sense to me.
Why would you pull down flyers of a missing person? Somebody's trying to find her. She has family. She has siblings. She has a mother. She has a father. She has a child.
So we was like, okay, what's up with this? Who is it that doesn't want us to figure this out?
So Carolyn, Letitia's mother, makes the decision it's time to get the press involved in this?
About a week or two after she went missing, that's when Sam Ford came in, the picture.
Letitia Frazier disappeared in August. DC Bureau Chief Sam Ford is live in Southeast Washington with that story. Sam.
Well, Gordon, we are on 18th and Trenton Place in Southeast Washington, where 18-year-old Letitia Monique Frazier disappeared.
Sam Ford, take one. Mark.
I'm Sam Ford. I'm the principal reporter for Stories in Washington, D.C. The family would call saying that this young girl had disappeared, so I thought, this is interesting. Let's go.
Sam Ford had came through and he was actually doing a news clip on us, and I mean, he's a really good guy.
Caroline Frazier, the missing woman's mother, was back at 7th Police District headquarters again today, joined by a host of family members and friends who desperately want to know where Letitia Frazier is.
I mean, I've been out there every day, like I said.
Carolyn's going to prowl these streets with Sam Ford and a camera and see what they can learn that Middleton would never have access to because of the code of silence involving the police.
It was a lot of doors we knocked on and asked them, did they see Tisha out here and all that.
We got to know these people. We saw how serious they were. We felt for them, you know? They had the love for their child, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing.
While they continued to stay in the streets, we were trying to fish it out, trying to figure out who it was, but we just couldn't break anybody.
You know, we kept covering this story. And at one point, somebody started doing like ugly stuff on Facebook.
Not only do we have people tearing down the posters, now her sister LaToya is receiving threats via social media. They are awful threats.
Somebody made the Facebook page. It said Monique Frazier using her middle and last name. When they started in with the threats, until I had like a whole book of threats.
January 13th, 10:15 p.m. Your sister is dead and gone. I am watching you. One dead, more to go.
They was nasty. They called us everything in the book.
I'm gonna be honest, like I was terrified. Some of those messages was like horrific.
Her black has been gone. Keep the flyers out of the hood. We took them down.
The threat indicates that Letitia Frazier is already dead. It's clear to Middleton this is not a missing person, this is a homicide.
We were blown away. There's somebody who is saying that they know that she's deceased. So of course we want to interview that person. How do you know? What's your involvement?
So Middleton uses the IT services of the police department to recover the IP address of where these threats originated. They find the location where this IP is addressed.
We gear up, we go out to this address.
If their suspicions are correct, they may be finding a murderer there.
You've got to be kidding me.
We get there, it's a vacant lot. There's no house there where this address should have been.
They find nothing.
It's like somebody used an address that did not exist.
This is the curse of the internet. It gives everyone anonymity, the most dangerous of all things. Step out here in the sunlight, tell me your name and your mother's name, and then repeat what you were going to say a minute ago, and people won't do it.
And then after that, we continued to pass out flyers, try to interview people, but we came up with nothing.
This investigation has gone on for almost 6 months. There is hardly any hope that Letitia Frazier is alive and well.
I think after those months of passing out flyers, my mind at that point just went to mush because it's like I knew something had to happen.
All I could do was just close my eyes and really pray, because I couldn't do nothing else.
No one gets to play God. The family deserves to know what happened to their daughter. Every family does.
You had this wonderful person missing and nobody saying anything. You have to put your boots to the ground, as I say, lever to the pavement.
Hey, I'm just checking Middleton out here looking at the case.
Talk to people. Eventually, you're gonna reach the heart of someone. Someone's heartstrings will be pulled. And they will tell you what you need to know.
In January of 2011, Caroline Frazier was still on local news, passing out missing person flyers for Letitia Frazier.
Middleton.
On every flyer, we put out call Crime Solvers with your tip.
Okay, hold on. What did they say exactly?
So someone called in and gave a tip.
They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier, and further, they know who's responsible for it.
And everything just started falling together from that one call.
I need this girl down here right now.
One thing that is certain about murder cases, the truth finds a way of escaping. Despite Herculean efforts to prevent it, it still finds a way.
Middleton.
Middleton is contacted by an anonymous informant. They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier.
We were able to track that person down and basically told them that, it was important that you help.
Letitia's family need to know what happened to their daughter.
They couldn't give, the whole spiel of what happened, but they could give us who was there. And I just couldn't believe who was involved.
I was shocked.
The informant says that Letitia Frazier was murdered by her own friends, Johnny Sweet, Brian Gaither, and Laney Bell. The very same friends who Middleton interviewed and put on a performance of no knowledge of the event.
I was in awe because these people were her friends.
I heard it was some more people there.
The informant said there were 3 other people that were present at the time, so a total of 6 people.
It's not common where you have a murder that is committed by 6 individuals.
What are the odds of that?
Thank you.
They had different degrees of culpability, but arrest warrants were obtained for all 6.
You needed a big team of detectives to bring them in, round them up.
When you plan an arrest like this, the first thing is surveillance. You got to put eyes on these people. You can't guess where they are. You have to know.
Them over there?
Mm-hmm. That's our boy.
The arrest teams fan out.
We got eyes on the suspect.
Okay, let's make our move.
Coordinated on a radio, and it's time to hit it. And they apprehend everybody at the same moment.
Hands in the air, Johnny. Get on the ground.
Stop! Lay down!
Show me your hands! Police, down on the ground! Show me your hands! Down on the ground!
Get on the ground now!
Down on the ground! Now! Down on the ground! Get on the ground!
Everyone is marched out in handcuffs, placed in a police car, driven to an interrogation room where they are alone. There's zero opportunity to discuss what they're going to say with anyone other than the police.
So how you want to do this?
Middleton is taking a calculated risk by rounding these people up. They don't have a provable charge against anybody. They need somebody to run their mouth.
We're just gonna have to talk to them one at a time.
It only has to start with one. You break the surface tension of the glass, and the glass crumbles. The very same thing with humans. Break the surface tension, the lies fold.
All right, Johnny. I'm gonna need you to tell me what you know about what happened to Letitia Frazier.
I got nothing for you, man.
I told you guys I haven't seen her.
I never saw her the night she disappeared.
Many of the individuals at first said they had no idea what they were talking about, and they had this code of silence.
It was amazing that these young people were able to keep it quiet that long, because young people run their mouths all the time. I mean, all the time.
There's an old expression in law enforcement. A secret can be kept between three people if two of them are dead. Secrets don't stay secrets. No one can maintain their silence. People suffer from diarrhea of the mouth. They always have, and they always will.
When you have a group of people involved in a crime together, now it's about playing everyone against each other. So they're not used to the harsh interrogations, the games we play to get confessions.
Well, that's not what he told me over there.
What did he say?
Our job is to get information from the suspects. We're allowed to lie in order to get to the truth. So when I say we play people against each other, so now I can go to one and say, this person's told me this. This person told me that.
Whatever she's telling you is a lie. That's not how it happened.
Well, then tell me how it did happen.
These were, far and away, the best interrogations that I had ever seen in my career then, and still are some of the best that I've ever seen now.
It was almost like art. It was like a picture being drawn. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Mitch has a great way of talking and communicating with people and have a great way of getting people to want to talk to him.
That's the one you need to crack right there.
Why you say that?
Because I know her.
I told them that this young lady, oddly enough, was a member of my church at that time.
Anika Nelson was her name.
Jack was telling us how to use church to our advantage to get her to confess.
She's religious. She has a sense of right and wrong. Pursue that.
Listen, young lady, I don't know how involved you were exactly, but I do know that you were there. So, I know that this is tearing you up inside, but trust me, the truth will set you free.
She can't deal with this anymore. She has to tell them the truth. Okay, you have the floor. What happened?
Tisha came over to Johnny's apartment after she got out of work.
She comes over to say hello to her friends. There's a confrontation that immediately occurs. She is accused of stealing $900 in cash out of Johnny Sweet's apartment. She is then immediately assaulted.
We all started hitting on her, and things just got out of hand.
It started off with the girls assaulting her, and then the guys got involved.
Then they all started hitting her, started kicking her.
It's an absolutely savage attack, something beyond the pale.
She was moaning, so they put a sock in her mouth.
And they put duct tape over her mouth. They put a pillowcase over her head and place it in a closet. You leave her there. I mean, how's she gonna breathe?
What happened to Letitia's body?
I don't know. They got rid of the body somehow.
There's no body. So now we have to prove that person we're talking about is the person that was there.
It's very important to find physical evidence.
We need to find something like blood, like part of Letitia Frazier. It's critical to the case, absolutely critical. So Middleton takes the CSI crew with her to Johnny Sweet's apartment, and they go over this apartment with a fine-tooth comb.
If you don't clean up properly, there's always going to be evidence left behind.
They sprayed a chemical all throughout the bathroom to be able to see if they could find any traces of organic material.
Hit the lights.
But they couldn't locate any. There was evidence that the defendants had used bleach to clean up, and bleach ordinarily will destroy forensic material. So we thought that our chances of being able to find something was very slim.
What about in here?
Nothing.
The floor, looking at it, has been cleaned thoroughly with something. The difficulty is blood has a tendency to seep. It seeps between floor cracks, between wallboard and the floor.
All right, well, cut up the floor.
It was a big production. I remember that the evidence technicians had to have someone bring a circular saw to literally saw a hole in the floor so that we could try to use it for forensic testing.
So if there was blood in this closet, they're going to find it?
When you have concrete evidence to say, yes, it was her, she was here, it's almost like the smoking gun.
After 6 months of effort, now we are 2 inches away from putting these people in prison, but we have to get those last 2 inches. We must, or nobody's going to jail. Well, this is a 6-month investigation involving some very unpleasant people who've already lied to the police a number of times, and now one of them confesses.
Anika Nelson, she came forward and told the police what she knew about what had happened that day.
But there has to be evidence in support of your confession, which in this case is traces of Letitia Frazier in that closet. The forensic search is everything to this case.
Heard back from forensics.
Well, I be damned.
Middleton is thrilled to discover that the CSI team has recovered human blood from the closet under the floor.
So you need to do a comparison to see if this blood is related to Letitia Frazier. Well, how do you do that if Letitia Frazier isn't here any longer?
So Middleton goes to the apartment where she lived to recover some of her personal things to get a DNA sample from her toothbrush, her hairbrush, or any other device.
We moved, so we had to get rid of that kind of stuff.
There's nothing remaining that belonged to Letitia Frazier that might have some DNA sample on it. But that doesn't mean you're out of luck.
There may be another way.
You can take DNA from a family member to see if there was a match with the DNA recovered.
So they were going to swab us for the DNA.
At the time, in 2010, I had not heard of using the parental links in a no-body case to try to establish the existence of a homicide. This was one of the first times where that had happened.
So a chief swab is taken from the mother, one from the father. When that goes through the laboratory and comes back, it is in fact a match. The blood in the closet is the blood of Letitia Frazier. That is no question.
I already knew that something happened to her, but to get the confirmation that she's actually gone, like, my heart could have dropped to my feet. Like, my sister's gone. How do you get another little sister? That doesn't happen. You know, so it kind of tore me up a lot.
When Middleton first talks to these three people, Bell, Sweet, and Gaither, she knows little or nothing about this case. Now we have a different circumstance.
We had a sense of what happened. Now we had to corroborate that. So the detectives then go to Brian Gaither. He was a little bit of the leader of the group.
I don't know, man. I don't know what happened to that girl.
They all think they're smart. They're going to talk their way out of this. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're talking to an experienced homicide detective, not some guy on a city bus. And they're going to pick at you until you start to bleed. Then we're going to see how smart you are.
We know Letitia died inside of Johnny's apartment. And we know that you put her in the closet.
When you hit people with facts, you can't refute the facts.
I believe the more they realized that we had information, that's what helped make them start cracking.
Look, man, she wasn't supposed to die or nothing.
Brian Gaither realizes there's no way out of this for him, and he confesses his involvement and tells the story as to what happened.
Johnny said Tisha owed him $900, so he had to teach her a lesson.
So the plan was for Johnny Sweet to get her over there, and he had some young ladies who was part of their little crew who were going to beat her up.
They invite her over to the apartment, which is not uncommon.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I got some fries if anyone's hungry. Why y'all slamming doors?
And before anything can be said, an assault begins with Letitia Frazier as the focus.
And it just went out of control.
It's like watching a group of jackals attack an animal in the wild. The pack mentality. It's frightening. Humans can be extremely frightening.
What did you do?
I put her in a sleep hold.
Gaither picks her up with his forearm under her chin, where you restrict the airway until the person passes out. He then tapes a sheet over her head and puts her in a closet. They go check on her a little while later and discover that she's dead.
So now they have a dead body in the closet.
Now they're in panic mode. What are we going to do?
We put her in the bathtub.
The bathtub. Why?
Because we were supposed to cut her up.
Johnny Sweet suggests that they dismember her body so it can be disposed of. He attempts to do this with a kitchen knife. Neither of these people understand how difficult that is.
It just becomes a disaster. They can't dismember her, so they put her in a tub, like a storage tub, and place her in the closet.
So now we have to get rid of the body.
We put her body in a dumpster.
The dumpster?
It's just so heartless.
Oh, wow. I was shocked that these young people just say, let's just throw her body in the dumpster. That was just coldness.
It was cruel the way they did her. Nobody deserves that, but especially not this young lady.
Now, Middleton is faced with trying to recover her remains.
We learned that the trash from that dumpster led us to a landfill down in Southern Virginia.
Now, it's been in this landfill for over 6 months, which means it's buried under hundreds of feet of garbage. Hundreds of feet. The most dangerous thing about a landfill is it produces methane gas.
The specialist said that given the dangers, they ultimately would not engage in the landfill excavation.
The Frasers and Campbells did not get the proper burial for their daughter.
That was outrageous. It wasn't fair to none of us.
I don't feel like nobody deserved to have to lay to rest in a trash landfill. Like, that's just...
Developing in the district tonight, a guilty plea from the man accused of killing teenager Letitia Frazier.
Prosecutors said they had planned to use ABC 7 news clips against 25-year-old Brian Gaither. We shot this video as we followed the victim's family leafleting the neighborhood where she disappeared in August 2010. Gaither put his arm around Frazier's mother, offered to let her search this apartment, where he now confesses he and 5 others attacked Frazier and choked her to death.
We believe that she was in that room when the mom was actually in the unit looking for her.
But I didn't know it, and I didn't smell nothing, so I figured, like, you know, she ain't here.
That's the part that's just sickening to me, truthfully. That's just crazy.
He actually hugged my mom and said, "Ma, you know, if I knew where your daughter was, you know I'd let you know." So for me, I'm just like, what type of people are you?
Of all of the cases that I have seen come through the homicide section, this was one of the most tragic. The trial of Johnny Sweet, he was the only person who actually went to trial. I remember it was particularly difficult because this was the first time that the family heard everything. We had shared a lot of information with them, but they had never seen the whole picture put together for them. And it wasn't until that trial that they had seen everything. And I know that was particularly difficult.
I remember one day I went to court and I was actually walking in the building. I normally would take the escalators, but today I just decided to get on the elevator. So I got on the elevator and the elevator stopped like a level up. And this guy got on like all these boxes and stuff. And it just like, it smelled like death. And I'll never forget, he got off on the same floor as me and we walked into the same courtroom. And my heart like to drop because I knew that was like what was left and what was last of when my sister was gone.
Johnny Sweet maintained his silence, refused to make a statement. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Mr. Gaither was also sentenced to life in prison. Lainey Bell. She was sentenced to 3 years because she was not physically involved in the event itself.
The rest of the defendants had different degrees of culpability, and Nika Nelsa being the least, and Kamal Hassan and Cynthia Proctor being somewhere in the middle. They received between 18 and 52 years, depending on their culpability.
I mean, I was glad that they caught somebody, but they can never serve a sentence enough that I would feel is justice for us losing her life.
I mean, she was a young lady, a kid, pretty much. She's 18 years old, and she was doing the best that she could. And at the end of the day, she lost her life over nothing.
Did $900 even exist? Probably not.
There was absolutely no evidence ever that she had stolen the money. In fact, she was the only one out of all of them who had a job.
I didn't believe that one bit, because I know my daughter. So if she working every day, she don't need to steal from nobody.
So what is the motive for this crime? Rage, anger, jealousy, something was said they didn't like. Who knows?
I really wish that everything happened differently. I wish she was still here. You know, they took her away from so many people. I'm grateful to have my niece. Like, she's so beautiful and they look like twins. Like, she gonna grow up and look just like her mom, so I'm grateful for that.
Miss her being here, miss her smiling. I think about her every day.
We still celebrate her life every year. And, she's not forgotten. She won't be ever.
Detective Middleton was emotional when I spoke with her about this case because you get that way. There are certain cases that just never actually go away, that will always be with her. It's just the way it is. It is the most difficult part of police work.
The road was empty that night. Just a narrow stretch of asphalt cutting through the flat, silent fields outside a small Texas town where everyone believed nothing truly terrible could happen. The kind of place where porch lights stayed on all night, where neighbors waved from pickup trucks, where the police scanner mostly reported stray cattle and teenage pranks. But on the morning of October 14th, 2001, something broke that illusion. At 6:12 a.m., a rancher driving toward town noticed a car parked crookedly along County Road 217. Engine off. Driver's door slightly open. The headlights were still on, weak beams fading in the early sunlight. He slowed. Something about the scene felt wrong. Cars didn't sit like that on empty country roads. Not here. He pulled over and stepped out, boots crunching against dry gravel. The wind moved softly through the grass. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. Then he looked inside the vehicle and froze. There was blood. Dark, dried, smeared across the driver's seat. But the driver was gone. Within minutes, the quiet Texas morning turned into a crime scene. Sheriff's deputies arrived first, red and blue lights flashing across miles of open land. Yellow tape snapped in the wind. The road closed. Radios crackled. Inside the car, they found a purse on the passenger seat. Driver's license inside. Name, Emily Carter. Age, 24. A waitress at a diner just outside town. Known to everyone. The kind of person who remembered customers' orders without writing them down. The kind who laughed loudly and left extra fries for the kids who couldn't afford them. Emily Carter had left work late the night before. She never made it home. Her car told a violent story. There was blood on the steering wheel, blood on the floor mat, blood on the inside of the door. But no body, no weapon, no sign of where she had gone, and no witnesses. The sheriff stood beside the vehicle, staring at the empty road stretching into the horizon. Either someone took her, he muttered quietly, or she never left this road alive. The town heard the news before noon, and the shock spread fast. This wasn't Dallas. This wasn't Houston. Violent crimes didn't belong in places like this. Parents started calling their children home early. The diner closed that afternoon, chairs flipped upside down on tables while the staff gathered silently in the back kitchen. Emily's mother sat in the sheriff's office for hours, clutching her daughter's photograph. Brown hair, wide smile. A girl who had planned to move to Austin someday. The sheriff promised they would find her. But even as he said the words, the investigation was already slipping into darkness. Because the road where the car was found had almost no traffic. No cameras. No houses nearby. Just fields. And silence. Crime scene technicians searched the car inch by inch. Fingerprints. Fibers. Hair. They found plenty of Emily's blood. Enough to tell investigators one terrifying thing. Whatever happened inside that car had been violent. Very violent. But there were no fingerprints except Emily's. No clear footprints in the dirt. The wind had erased everything. The next step was obvious. Reconstruct her final hours. Emily Carter finished her shift at the diner at 10:47 p.m. Multiple coworkers confirmed it. She had joked with the cook about a customer who tried to pay with a $2 bill. She had complained about the late shift. She had said she was tired. Then she walked outside. Security lights illuminated the parking lot. Her car was parked alone near the back fence. One coworker remembered something strange. Emily had paused before getting into the car. Like she noticed something. Or someone. But she didn't say anything. She simply got inside, started the engine, and drove away. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Investigators mapped the route from the diner to Emily's apartment. It should have taken 12 minutes. Her car was found 30 minutes away in the opposite direction, which meant one thing. Emily hadn't chosen that road. Someone else had. And somewhere between the diner and that lonely stretch of County Road 217, something had happened that no one saw. The sheriff's department questioned everyone they could think of. Co-workers, friends, ex-boyfriends, regular customers at the diner. One name appeared again and again in casual conversation. Not as a suspect, just someone people mentioned when they talked about Emily's life. A quiet man, a respected member of the community, someone who had known her for years. Daniel Whitaker, a retired high school history teacher, 62 years old, widower, polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man who attended every town meeting and graded papers late into the night during his teaching years. No criminal record, no reputation for violence. He had taught half the town's adults when they were teenagers, Emily Carter included. But at that point in the investigation, his name meant nothing. Just another background detail. Another thread in a growing web of interviews. The real mystery remained the car. Investigators studied the blood pattern inside it. The evidence suggested a struggle in the driver's seat. Emily had likely been attacked while driving, or just after she stopped. There were scratches on the inside of the door panel, as if someone had fought to escape. The passenger seat had been pushed back violently. But again, no fingerprints, no weapon, and still no body. Search teams combed the fields surrounding the road for days. Helicopters circled overhead. Dogs tracked scent trails that vanished into dry earth. Volunteers formed long lines, walking shoulder to shoulder across acres of land. Nothing. It was as if Emily Carter had simply disappeared into the Texas wind. Weeks passed, then months. The case slowly transformed into something investigators dread. A missing person with almost no evidence. The sheriff held press conferences asking for information. Local newspapers printed headlines filled with alarm. Missing waitress. Mystery shocks Texas town.
Tips poured in.
Most led nowhere. A truck driver claimed he saw a struggle on the road that night, but he couldn't remember exactly where. A teenager reported hearing a scream near a farm miles away, but the timeline didn't match. Every promising lead collapsed under scrutiny. The case grew colder and colder until winter came. The town tried to return to normal life, but Emily's disappearance hung over everything like a shadow. Her apartment remained untouched. Her mother refused to move anything inside. Her clothes stayed in the closet. Her coffee mug remained on the kitchen counter, waiting, as if she might walk through the door any minute. But she never did. And deep inside the sheriff's office, the file labeled Emily Carter, October 2001, began collecting dust. Another unsolved mystery in rural Texas. Another name added to the quiet, growing list investigators call cold cases. But the truth about what happened on that empty road had not disappeared. It had only gone silent, waiting, hidden in memories, in overlooked details. In the life of someone who had stood in this town for decades, smiling, politely teaching history, blending into the quiet rhythm of small-town life. A man no one had ever imagined capable of violence. Daniel Whitaker. And 20 years later, his name would explode across headlines. Because the quiet teacher everyone trusted was about to become the center of one of the most shocking cold case revelations the town had ever seen. The file sat in a gray metal cabinet for years, buried under the weight of other reports, other tragedies, other mysteries that demanded immediate attention. The label had faded slightly, but the name was still clear. Emily Carter. October 2001. Missing. Unsolved. For the deputies who had worked the case in those early months, the memory never fully disappeared. They remembered the empty road, the smell of dry grass blowing across the fields, the quiet dread that settled in their stomachs when the search teams returned day after day with nothing. But time has a way of softening urgency. New crimes happen. New victims appear. Investigators retire, move away, or shift to other departments. And the town learns how to live with unanswered questions. Emily's mother kept calling the sheriff's office for the first 2 years. Every few weeks. Sometimes asking if there had been progress. Sometimes simply asking if someone was still looking. The answer was always careful. Yes, ma'am. The case is still open. But open didn't mean active. The car remained the centerpiece of the mystery. It had been stored in an evidence garage outside town, sealed and untouched after the initial forensic sweep. In 2001, DNA analysis was still slower, less precise, far less powerful than it would become. Technicians had collected samples of blood and fibers, but they found nothing pointing to a suspect. No unknown DNA profile. No hair belonging to someone else. Just Emily's blood. The implication was terrifying. Whoever attacked her had left almost nothing behind. And whoever had taken her body had done it with chilling precision. Rumors began spreading across town as months passed without answers. Some believed a drifter passing through had abducted her. Others whispered about a serial killer traveling across Texas highways. There were even darker theories. That someone from the town itself had done it. Someone who knew the roads. Someone who knew Emily. Someone who knew exactly where to disappear. But suspicion without evidence is just noise. And in small towns, noise fades quickly when daily life pushes forward. The diner reopened after a week of mourning. A small photograph of Emily was taped beside the register. Her smile frozen in time. Customers would glance at it, shake their heads quietly, and then return to their coffee and eggs. But a few people remembered something else. Something small. Something strange. Emily had mentioned a man who came into the diner regularly during her late shifts. An older man. Polite. Quiet. A good tipper. He liked to sit in the corner booth near the window and drink black coffee while reading. Sometimes he stayed for hours. Emily once joked to a coworker that he always seemed to appear on nights when the diner was nearly empty. Creepy history teacher vibes, she had laughed. But she didn't seem afraid. Just amused. The man was known to most of the town. Daniel Whitaker. Former history teacher at the high school. A man whose life seemed almost painfully ordinary. Born in Texas. Taught American history for 32 years. Married once. His wife had died of cancer a decade earlier. He lived alone in a small brick house not far from the school. Students remembered him as strict but fair. Parents described him as dependable, reliable, quiet. The kind of man who returned library books on time. The kind who volunteered to organize school events. The kind of man no one would ever associate with violence. Which was exactly why no one looked too closely at him. Not in 2001. Not in 2002. Not for a long time. But something about Emily's disappearance lingered in the back of investigators' minds. Because of the car. The attack had happened quickly. Violently. Inside the vehicle. And then the body had vanished without a trace. That kind of crime usually required two things. Control. And familiarity with the area. Someone had forced Emily to stop or pulled her over somehow. Someone had attacked her inside the car. Someone had removed her body and transported it away before dawn. That suggested planning. Or experience. But the investigation had stalled. Years slipped by. The file gathered dust. Until a quiet shift began happening in forensic science across the United States. DNA technology evolved. Cold cases that once seemed impossible began reopening. Evidence stored for decades suddenly held new secrets. Tiny fragments once considered useless could now reveal entire genetic profiles. And in Texas, one particular investigator began reviewing old cases that might benefit from the new technology. His name was Detective Marcus Alvarez. He had a reputation inside the department for patience. Obsessive patience. He didn't chase headlines. He chased details. Small ones. Forgotten ones. The kind that hide in paperwork for 20 years. In 2019, he requested access to dozens of unsolved files. Emily Carter's case was among them. When Alvarez opened the folder for the first time, the photographs hit him immediately. The car, the blood, the empty road. He read every report slowly. Every interview, every note, every witness statement. Something about the case bothered him, not because of what was there, but because of what wasn't. No suspects had ever been seriously pursued. No one had ever been tied to the scene. No motive had been identified. It was as if the crime had been committed by someone invisible. That rarely happens. People leave traces, even careful ones. Alvarez requested that the original evidence from the vehicle be re-examined with modern forensic techniques. The car was transported to a state lab. Technicians began the painstaking process of reprocessing every surface. Door handles, seat fabric, seat belt latch, steering wheel. The work took weeks. Because they weren't just looking for obvious DNA. They were searching for microscopic fragments, skin cells, sweat residue, touch DNA that older technology couldn't detect. And eventually, they found something. A partial DNA profile. Extremely faint. Recovered from the passenger side door frame. It wasn't Emily's. For the first time in 18 years, investigators had something new. A genetic fingerprint left behind by someone inside the vehicle the night Emily disappeared. The discovery electrified the department. But it also created a new problem. A DNA profile means nothing unless it matches someone in a database. Alvarez ran the sample through national systems. Nothing. No match. Which meant the person responsible had never been arrested for a crime requiring DNA collection. Or their DNA simply wasn't on file. But Alvarez didn't give up. Because DNA technology had one more tool investigators were beginning to use. A controversial one. Genetic genealogy. Instead of searching criminal databases, scientists could compare unknown DNA with public genealogy records. Family trees. Ancestry profiles. Distant relatives. The technique had already solved several famous cold cases across the country. But it required careful legal approval. And patience. Months of analysis. Eventually, the results came back. The unknown DNA belonged to someone related to a family line in Texas. A small family tree. Not large. Not complicated. But one name appeared in the extended lineage. A man who had lived his entire life in the same quiet town where Emily disappeared. A retired teacher. 79 years old. Daniel Whitaker. And suddenly, the man no one had ever suspected was no longer just a background detail in the file. He was the center of it. Because the DNA recovered from Emily Carter's car was genetically linked to him. And after nearly 2 decades of silence, the cold case that had haunted the town was about to explode back into the light. The moment the genetic genealogy report arrived, the atmosphere inside the investigation unit changed. For nearly 2 decades, Emily Carter's disappearance had existed as a ghost in the department's archives, a quiet, unsolved question that no one could answer. Detectives who once chased leads had retired. Files had yellowed. Witnesses had moved away. But now a name had surfaced from the silence. Daniel Whitaker. A man who had spent his entire life inside the same small Texas community. A teacher. A widower. A familiar face at town meetings, grocery stores, church gatherings. 79 years old. If the genealogy analysis was correct, the unidentified DNA from Emily's car belonged to someone within Whitaker's bloodline. Not proof. Not yet. But enough to ignite something investigators had not felt in years. Momentum. Detective Marcus Alvarez stared at Whitaker's name on the report for a long time before saying anything. Because the name was already inside the case file. Buried in old interviews. Mentioned casually by diner staff. Not as a suspect. Just a regular customer. A man who had known Emily Carter since she was a teenager in his classroom. A man who had been quietly sitting in the background of the investigation from the very beginning. And somehow, no one had ever looked closely enough. Alvarez reopened every interview connected to Whitaker. Every witness statement. Every timeline. Slowly, details began to rearrange themselves into a shape that investigators in 2001 had never seen. Whitaker had been a frequent visitor to the diner during Emily's late shifts. Not every night, but often enough that staff remembered him. He liked the corner booth. Black coffee. No sugar. He sometimes stayed until closing. But what investigators in 2001 never asked was the question that now seemed obvious. Where was Daniel Whitaker on the night Emily disappeared? The original files contained only a brief note. Whitaker had told investigators he was home grading old school papers. Alone. No one had verified it, because at the time there was no reason to doubt him. He was a retired teacher, a respected member of the community. The idea that he could be connected to a violent crime seemed absurd. But the DNA report changed everything. Alvarez ordered quiet surveillance. Not an arrest. Not yet. Just observation. Because if Whitaker truly was connected to the DNA from the car, investigators needed more. They needed confirmation. A direct sample of Whitaker's DNA to compare against the evidence recovered from Emily Carter's vehicle. But collecting that sample required care. If the old teacher realized he was under investigation, he could disappear or destroy potential evidence. So detectives began watching. Whitaker's daily life was almost painfully predictable. Every morning, he left his house at 7:30 a.m., drove to the same diner where Emily once worked, ordered coffee, read the newspaper. Then he returned home. In the afternoon, he walked slowly through the neighborhood park, hands clasped behind his back, nodding politely to anyone who passed. In the evening, he watched television with the lights dimmed. Nothing about his routine suggested violence. Nothing about the quiet old man walking through the park hinted at a dark secret. But the DNA didn't lie. Someone related to him had been inside Emily Carter's car during the attack. And as investigators dug deeper into Whitaker's past, something else emerged. A pattern. Subtle, but unsettling. Several former students remembered Whitaker paying unusual attention to certain girls in his classes. Nothing overt, nothing criminal, just behavior that, in hindsight, felt uncomfortable. Lingering conversations after class. Offers to drive students home if their parents were late. Small gestures that once seemed harmless. Now, they looked different. Alvarez spoke with a woman named Rachel Simmons, one of Whitaker's students in the early 1990s. She hesitated before describing something she had never told anyone before. One afternoon after school, Whitaker offered her a ride home. During the drive, he took a longer route than necessary. Just driving, talking, asking questions about her life, her relationships, her plans after graduation. Rachel said nothing inappropriate happened, but something about the moment had made her uneasy. The memory stayed with her for years. At the time, she convinced herself she was overthinking it. But when investigators asked about Whitaker nearly 20 years later, the feeling returned immediately. That quiet discomfort. That strange sense that the teacher's interest had been too personal. Alvarez added the statement to the growing file. Then he focused again on the DNA. Investigators needed Whitaker's genetic sample. And sometimes the simplest methods are the most effective. One evening, a surveillance team followed Whitaker to the same diner he visited every morning. He sat alone near the window, ordered coffee, read the newspaper. When he finished, he placed the cup on the table and left. The moment he walked out the door, a detective stepped inside, picked up the cup, carefully sealed it in an evidence bag. Inside the lab, technicians extracted the DNA left on the rim. Saliva, skin cells. Enough for a full genetic comparison. Days later, the results came back. And the match was undeniable. The DNA recovered from Emily Carter's car belonged to Daniel Whitaker. The room fell silent as investigators read the report. For 18 years, the case had been nothing but questions. Now, suddenly, there was an answer.
A man.
A face. A quiet retired teacher who had lived peacefully in the town while the mystery of Emily Carter's disappearance haunted her family. But even with the DNA match, the case still had a massive hole. Emily Carter's body had never been found. Without it, proving murder would be difficult. Defense attorneys could argue anything. That Emily left willingly. that the blood inside the car came from a fight that didn't end in death, that Whitaker had been in the vehicle at some other time. Investigators needed more. They needed to understand what happened that night on County Road 217. And more importantly, where Emily Carter had gone. Because somewhere out there, in the vast Texas land stretching beyond the town's quiet streets, the truth had been hidden for nearly 20 years. And if Whitaker had buried it, he had done so carefully, very carefully. But the silence surrounding the cold case was finally breaking. And the man who once taught history in a quiet classroom was about to become the central figure in one of the most shocking investigations the town had ever seen. Because for the first time since October 2001, detectives were no longer chasing a ghost. They were chasing a killer. And Daniel Whitaker had no idea that the quiet routine of his peaceful retirement was about to collapse around him. The DNA report sat on the table under the harsh fluorescent lights of the investigation room. No one spoke for several seconds, because everyone in that room understood exactly what it meant. For nearly 20 years, the disappearance of Emily Carter had lived in a place investigators dread the most, the land of unanswered questions. No suspects, no body, no witnesses who could tell a clear story. Now suddenly, a quiet man who had walked freely through the town for decades was tied directly to the crime scene. Daniel Whitaker, a retired teacher, 79 years old. His DNA had been inside Emily Carter's car the night she vanished. Detective Marcus Alvarez leaned back slowly in his chair and stared at the evidence board. The photographs were still there, the car on the empty road, the blood on the seat, the door hanging open beneath the pale morning sky of October 2001. Back then, the image had represented confusion. Now it represented something else. Someone had been in that car with Emily. Someone who had fought with her. Someone who had left DNA behind. And that someone had spent nearly 2 decades living quietly just a few miles away. But the moment investigators confirmed the DNA match, a new problem emerged. Evidence alone wasn't enough. Not yet. Because the defense would ask the most obvious question in court. Why would a retired teacher's DNA be inside Emily Carter's car? The prosecution needed a clear narrative, a story supported by facts, a timeline, something that explained exactly what had happened on that lonely Texas road. So Alvarez began rebuilding the night from the beginning. October 13th, 2001. A Saturday night. The diner where Emily worked had been moderately busy until about 9 p.m., then the usual quiet lull settled over the place. Coworkers remembered Emily joking with customers, wiping down tables, moving quickly between the grill and the counter. One detail in the old reports now caught Alvarez's attention. Daniel Whitaker had been there that night, sitting in the corner booth, drinking coffee, watching. A waitress named Carla Jennings confirmed it during a new interview nearly 2 decades later. Her memory was surprisingly sharp. "Yeah," she said quietly, leaning forward across the interview table. "Mr. Whitaker came in that night. I remember because he stayed longer than usual." "How long?" Alvarez asked. "Until closing." Emily had closed the diner that night. 10:47 p.m., which meant Whitaker had been inside the building just minutes before she left. But that wasn't the most disturbing part of Carla's memory. It was what happened right before Emily walked out the door. She looked nervous, Carla said slowly. "Nervous about what?" Carla hesitated. "I don't know." She kept glancing at Whitaker's booth, like she didn't want him there. That detail had never appeared in the original investigation. In 2001, no one had asked the question in exactly the right way. No one had realized Whitaker might matter. Now, suddenly, the entire moment looked different. Because if Emily had been uneasy around him, and he followed her outside, then the attack inside the car might not have been random at all. It might have started in that diner. Investigators checked the original parking lot layout, the lights, the angles, the distance between the building and Emily's car. Whitaker could easily have watched her walk outside. He could have followed minutes later. The road where the car was discovered was in the opposite direction of Emily's apartment, which meant someone had either forced her to drive there or had driven the car themselves. Alvarez studied Whitaker's old property records next. Something interesting appeared almost immediately. In 2001, Whitaker owned a small piece of rural land outside town. 25 acres. Mostly undeveloped. The property sat less than 12 miles from County Road 217. 12 miles. Close enough to transport something quickly. Close enough to hide something permanently. The realization sent a ripple through the investigative team. Because if Emily Carter's body had been taken somewhere, that property would be the first place to look. But before investigators could move forward with a search warrant, they needed to know more about Whitaker's life during that time. And as they began speaking with people who knew him decades ago, a darker portrait slowly began forming beneath the surface of the polite old teacher. Several former students described him as intense. Not violent. Not openly inappropriate. But intense. He paid close attention to certain students. Especially young women. He remembered personal details about their lives. Sometimes he asked questions that made them uncomfortable. One former student remembered Whitaker showing up unexpectedly at a school event she attended with friends. Another remembered him calling her house to ask why she missed class. The behavior never crossed an obvious legal line. But it left a strange impression. The kind of impression people only begin to understand years later. Then another detail surfaced. Emily Carter herself had been one of Whitaker's students. Senior year. Investigators pulled yearbooks from the high school archives. There he was, standing beside a group of graduating students. Gray suit. Thin smile. Emily Carter standing 2 rows away. Bright-eyed. Young. 17 years old. The image felt ordinary at first glance. But when Alvarez stared at it longer, something about it felt deeply unsettling. Because now he knew something no one else in that photograph could have imagined. 6 years later, the teacher and the student would cross paths again in a very different setting. The diner. Late at night. And one of them would disappear forever. Investigators continued digging into Whitaker's life. His finances. His travel history. His phone records from 2001. Most records were long gone. But one thing became clear. Whitaker rarely left town. He lived a quiet, isolated routine. Work. Home. Church. The diner. The pattern rarely changed. Which made the violence of the crime even harder to understand. Because whoever attacked Emily Carter inside that car had done so with sudden, explosive brutality. Blood evidence suggested a struggle. A desperate one. But what investigators didn't yet know was why. Why Whitaker had been in the car. Why Emily had driven down that road. Why the violence happened. And, most importantly, where Emily Carter was now. Because somewhere beyond the quiet streets of the town, hidden beneath fields or woods or dry Texas soil, the answer to the entire mystery might still exist. And if Whitaker had buried that secret, then nearly 20 years of silence had not erased it. It had only buried it deeper. But now investigators were digging. And the quiet retired teacher who once lectured students about the past was about to discover that the past has a way of returning. Especially when the truth has been hidden for too long. Because soon, detectives would stand on that remote piece of land Whitaker once owned. And they would begin searching the ground, looking for the one piece of evidence that could finally tell the story of what happened on that dark October night in 2001. The story Whitaker had carried alone for nearly 2 decades. And the story the town was about to hear for the first time. The land looked ordinary. That was the first thing Detective Marcus Alvarez noticed when he stepped out of the truck and stared across the property Daniel Whitaker had owned in 2001. 25 acres of quiet Texas countryside stretched in every direction. Dry grass. Scattered mesquite trees. A rusted fence line that sagged in places where time had slowly weakened the posts. Nothing about the place suggested violence. Nothing about it suggested that a secret might be buried beneath the soil. But investigators knew better than to trust appearances. Because when someone disappears without a trace, the truth often ends up hidden in places that look completely normal. A search warrant had taken weeks to secure. Prosecutors needed to justify digging up land connected to a man who, legally speaking, had not yet been charged with any crime. The DNA evidence linked Whitaker to Emily Carter's car, but without a body, the case still carried uncertainty. Still, the judge signed the warrant. And now the quiet property outside town had transformed into a potential crime scene. Yellow tape fluttered in the warm wind. Forensic teams began mapping the ground in careful grids. Ground-penetrating radar equipment rolled slowly across the dirt, scanning beneath the surface for disturbances in the soil. The process was slow, painfully slow. Hours passed under the heavy Texas sun as investigators watched the monitors, looking for irregular shapes that might indicate a burial site. But the land remained stubbornly silent. Alvarez walked the perimeter while the technicians worked. The property had once belonged to Whitaker, but records showed he sold it in 2004 to a rancher who used the land for occasional cattle grazing. The new owner had given full permission for the search, though he admitted he rarely visited the far edges of the acreage. Too dry for much, the rancher said with a shrug. Mostly just brush and snakes. Alvarez looked across the terrain again. If someone wanted to hide a body, it wouldn't take much effort out here. A shovel. An hour of darkness. And the vast quiet of rural Texas would swallow the evidence forever. Late in the afternoon, the radar operator called out, "Detective, you might want to see this." The team gathered around the screen. A faint rectangular disturbance appeared beneath the soil near a cluster of trees on the far side of the property. It wasn't large, maybe 6 feet long, but the shape looked deliberate. Alvarez's pulse quickened. It could be nothing. Old debris. An animal burial. A discarded fence post. But it could also be something else. Within minutes, the excavation team began digging. The first few inches of dirt came away easily. The soil here was loose and dry, disturbed long ago and hardened again by years of heat and wind. Shovels scraped carefully as the hole deepened. Everyone stood quietly around the site, waiting. 10 inches. Then 12. Then 15. One of the forensic technicians suddenly froze. "Hold on." She crouched lower and brushed dirt gently away with her gloved hand. Something pale appeared beneath the soil. At first it looked like stone. Then the shape became clearer. Curved. Smooth. Bone. A human bone. The air around the excavation site changed instantly. The casual murmurs disappeared. Every movement slowed. Careful. Precise. The digging stopped and the forensic team switched to brushes and small tools. More bones appeared as the dirt was removed layer by layer. A rib. Part of a skull. Fragments of clothing tangled in the soil. The remains had been buried for nearly 2 decades, but there was no doubt what the investigators were looking at. A human body. Alvarez felt a tight weight settle in his chest. After 18 years of mystery, Emily Carter had finally been found. But the moment carried no sense of victory, only a quiet, heavy sadness. Because the discovery confirmed what everyone had feared from the very beginning. Emily Carter had never left that road alive. The excavation continued for hours as the remains were carefully documented and removed from the ground. The skeleton was incomplete in places, scattered slightly by years of soil movement and small animals. But enough remained for identification. Nearby, the team uncovered something else. A piece of fabric. Faded blue. Denim. Possibly part of a jacket. Then another object emerged from the dirt. A small metal clasp attached to what looked like the strap of a purse. Investigators checked the original evidence photos from 2001. Emily Carter had been carrying a small denim purse the night she disappeared. The clasp matched. By nightfall, the remains had been fully recovered and placed in sealed forensic containers. The quiet property was suddenly illuminated by floodlights as technicians continued photographing the site. Every inch of disturbed earth was cataloged. Alvarez stood beside the excavation pit long after the others stepped away. 18 years. That's how long Emily Carter had been lying beneath this soil. Hidden. Forgotten by the world except for the few people who refused to stop asking questions. Her mother. A handful of detectives. And now the truth had finally surfaced. But one question remained louder than all the others.
Why?
Why had Daniel Whitaker done it? The answer would come later. Because as soon as the remains were transported to the medical examiner's office, forensic specialists began the careful process of confirmation. Dental records, bone analysis, fragments of clothing. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. The remains belonged to Emily Carter. And the injuries told a violent story. A deep fracture on the skull suggested blunt force trauma. Repeated blows. The kind that happened during a desperate struggle. The kind that happened when someone refuses to stop. The medical examiner closed the report slowly after finishing the analysis. Cause of death: homicide. After nearly 2 decades, the missing person case had become a confirmed murder investigation. And there was only one person connected to both the crime scene and the burial site: Daniel Whitaker, the quiet retired teacher who still lived peacefully inside the same small Texas town. But the most shocking moment had not yet arrived. Because when detectives finally knocked on Whitaker's door days later, the man who opened it did not look surprised. He simply stood there in the doorway.
Thin.
Gray-haired.
Calm.
Looking at the investigators as if he had been expecting them. As if somewhere deep inside, he knew the ground had finally given up the secret he buried 18 years ago. And now the silence that protected him for so long was about to end. The knock on the door echoed softly through the quiet neighborhood. It was late afternoon. The sun hung low over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the quiet street where Daniel Whitaker had lived for decades. The house itself looked exactly like every other home on the block, brick walls faded slightly by time, trimmed hedges along the walkway, a small American flag hanging beside the front window. Ordinary. Peaceful. The kind of house no one would associate with murder. Detective Marcus Alvarez stood on the porch, with 2 other investigators behind him. For a moment, none of them spoke. The discovery on the rural property had changed everything. The remains had been confirmed. Emily Carter was no longer missing. She had been murdered. And the man connected to both the car and the burial site lived quietly inside this house. Alvarez raised his hand and knocked again. 3 firm taps. A pause. Footsteps moved slowly behind the door. Then the handle turned. Daniel Whitaker appeared in the doorway. He looked smaller than Alvarez expected. Age had bent his shoulders slightly forward. His gray hair was thin and neatly combed. Wire-rimmed glasses rested low on his nose. But what struck the detectives most was his expression. No confusion. No alarm. Just a quiet calm. Whitaker looked at each of them carefully before speaking. "I suppose this is about Emily Carter," he said. The words landed like a stone. For a moment the investigators said nothing. Because suspects rarely open the door and immediately say the victim's name. Alvarez kept his voice steady. "Mr. Whitaker, we'd like to ask you some questions." Whitaker nodded once, as if this moment had been rehearsed in his mind many times. "Of course," he said quietly. "You'd better come in." The living room smelled faintly of old books and coffee. Shelves lined the walls, packed tightly with history volumes and teaching materials Whitaker had kept long after retirement. Framed photographs from decades of school events hung between the shelves. Graduation ceremonies. Class trips. Rows of smiling students standing beside their teacher. Emily Carter might even have been in one of them. Whitaker gestured toward the couch. "You gentlemen want coffee?" "No, thank you," Alvarez replied. Whitaker sat in an armchair across from them. His hands rested calmly on the arms of the chair. For a 79-year-old man facing homicide investigators, he looked remarkably composed. Alvarez studied him carefully. People react to pressure in different ways. Some panic. Some deny everything. Some talk too much. But Whitaker simply waited, as if he already knew the conversation that was about to unfold. Alvarez placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs. The car. The excavation site. The recovered remains. He slid one photo across the table. Whitaker looked down at it. It was the image of the burial pit on the rural property. The old teacher stared at the photograph for several seconds without moving. When he finally spoke, his voice remained steady. "So you found her?" Not a question. A statement. Alvarez leaned forward.
Yes.
"We did." Silence filled the room. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street, tires whispering against the pavement. Whitaker exhaled softly. "I wondered how long it would take," he said. The investigators exchanged a quick glance. The man was not denying anything, but he wasn't confessing either. Alvarez opened the folder again and removed another photograph. This one showed Emily's car from the night it was discovered in 2001. Blood on the driver's seat. Door open to the cold Texas morning. "We also found her DNA inside the vehicle," Alvarez said. Whitaker adjusted his glasses. "I expected that too." Another quiet statement. No shock. No anger. Just quiet acknowledgement. For nearly 20 years, the investigation had been chasing a ghost. Now the man responsible seemed almost relieved. But Alvarez knew better than to assume anything. "Mr. Whitaker," he said carefully, "we believe you were with Emily Carter the night she disappeared." Whitaker didn't interrupt. "You were inside her car," Alvarez continued. "Her body was buried on land you owned at the time. The evidence places you at the center of this investigation." Whitaker folded his hands together. The room felt very still. Finally he spoke. "You're missing part of the story." The words came out slowly, measured. "Then tell it to us," Alvarez said. Whitaker leaned back in the chair and stared toward the bookshelves. For a moment, he looked less like a suspect and more like a tired old teacher remembering a distant moment from the past. "When you spend your life teaching history," he said quietly, "you learn something interesting." No one spoke. Whitaker continued. "People always believe the truth is simple, that events follow a clear path. One thing leads to another." His gaze drifted back to the detectives. "But that's not how history works. And it's not how this happened." Alvarez felt a subtle tension tighten in the room. "Emily Carter didn't plan to die that night," Whitaker said softly. "That much is true." The detectives waited. "And I didn't plan to kill her." The sentence hung in the air like a sudden crack of thunder. It wasn't a full confession, but it was close. Whitaker lowered his eyes toward the photograph again. "I had known Emily since she was 17, he said. "She was a bright student. Smart. Curious. Always asking questions." Alvarez kept his voice calm. "And in 2001? Whitaker hesitated. "In 2001, she worked at the diner." "You visited often?" "Yes."
"Why?"
Whitaker's expression shifted slightly. Something deeper moved behind his eyes. Loneliness. Obsession. Regret. "Because she remembered me," he said quietly. The answer sounded simple, but the way he said it carried something darker. Whitaker leaned forward slightly in his chair. "You see, detective, when you grow old, the world forgets you." The room remained silent. But Emily didn't. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the houses. Inside the quiet living room, the man who had lived peacefully for nearly 2 decades was finally beginning to reveal the truth buried beneath the soil. And the story he was about to tell would expose a chain of choices, obsession, and violence that had begun long before the night Emily Carter disappeared. A story that would finally explain what happened inside that car on the empty road. And why a respected teacher ended up burying a young woman beneath 25 acres of silent Texas land. Because the past he had hidden for 18 years was now rising to the surface. And Daniel Whitaker was no longer trying to stop it. Daniel Whitaker sat very still in the armchair, his hands resting loosely together as if he were preparing to lecture a classroom instead of speaking to homicide detectives. Outside the window, the quiet Texas street looked unchanged. Children's bicycles leaned against driveways. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Ordinary life continued just a few feet away from a conversation that had taken nearly 20 years to begin. Whitaker's eyes lingered on the photograph of Emily Carter's car lying on the table. "I never thought it would last this long," he said quietly. Detective Marcus Alvarez didn't interrupt. Suspects sometimes talk when silence is allowed to stretch. The weight of the moment begins to press on them. Words slip out because the mind is trying to justify something it knows cannot truly be justified. Whitaker rubbed his thumb slowly across his knuckles. I suppose you want to understand how it happened, he said. Yes, Alvarez replied. Whitaker nodded once. For a moment his gaze drifted toward the shelves of history books lining the walls, as though searching for something in the past that might explain the present. When Emily was a student, he began slowly. She stood out. Not because she was the smartest. I had plenty of bright students. But she had something else. He paused. A kind of warmth. A curiosity. She asked questions other students didn't bother asking. Alvarez watched him carefully. Whitaker wasn't speaking like a man describing a crime. He sounded like a teacher remembering a favorite pupil, and that made the atmosphere in the room feel even colder. After she graduated, I assumed I would never see her again, Whitaker continued. That's how teaching works. Students move on. They disappear into the world. He gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But then one night I walked into the diner, and there she was. Emily had been 23 years old in 2001, working late shifts, saving money, trying to figure out what she wanted from life. Whitaker said he almost didn't recognize her at first, but she recognized him immediately. Mr. Whitaker, she had said with a laugh when she saw him. Still teaching people about the Civil War? Whitaker said the moment stayed with him for days. Because it had been years since anyone looked at him the way she had in that moment, with warmth, with familiarity, with the simple kindness of remembering. For a man who had spent years alone after his wife died, that small moment meant more than it should have. He started visiting the diner more often. At first it felt harmless. Just coffee. Small talk. Emily would stop at his table between orders. They talked about books, about history, about the town. Whitaker insisted he never intended anything inappropriate. But something inside him had already begun shifting. Because loneliness can twist the way people interpret kindness. A smile becomes something more. A casual conversation becomes attention. And attention can slowly turn into obsession. Whitaker admitted he began timing his visits to the diner around Emily's schedule. If she worked the late shift, he appeared. If she wasn't there, he sometimes left without ordering anything. He told himself it was innocent. Just conversation. Just the comfort of being remembered by someone who once sat in his classroom. But Emily's coworkers began noticing the pattern. The old teacher, who stayed too long. The quiet man watching the counter from his booth. Emily herself eventually noticed. Whitaker admitted she had asked him one night why he kept coming in so often. He said he laughed it off. Told her the coffee was good. Told her he enjoyed quiet places. But the truth was more complicated. Because the more he saw her, the harder it became for him to return to his empty house at night. The silence inside those walls grew heavier. The memory of his wife's absence grew sharper. And the idea that Emily represented some small connection to life outside that loneliness became something he couldn't easily let go of. Whitaker stopped speaking for a moment. The detectives waited. His voice softened when he continued. The night it happened, I didn't plan it. Alvarez leaned forward slightly. What happened that night? Whitaker exhaled slowly. Emily told me something. The words came carefully. As she was closing the diner, she mentioned she might be leaving town. The sentence seemed simple, but Whitaker's expression tightened slightly as he spoke. She said she was thinking about moving to Austin. A new job. A fresh start. Alvarez said nothing. Whitaker looked down at his hands again. You have to understand something, he said quietly. For her, it was just conversation. Just a young woman talking about her future. But for you? Alvarez asked. Whitaker's eyes lifted slowly. For me, it felt like the last door in the world was closing. The room fell silent. Because suddenly the emotional center of the crime was beginning to reveal itself. Whitaker described watching Emily move around the diner that night, laughing with customers, talking about her plans, her excitement about leaving. And inside Whitaker's mind, something began unraveling. He realized that once she left town, he would never see her again. The The small routine that had filled the emptiness of his life would disappear. No more late-night coffee. No more conversations across the counter. No more familiar voice saying his name. Just silence. The kind of silence that had already consumed most of his life. I waited until she closed, Whitaker said quietly. Then I followed her outside. Alvarez's jaw tightened slightly. Emily had walked into the parking lot alone that night. She climbed into her car. Whitaker approached before she could start the engine. He told her he just wanted to talk. Just for a minute. Emily hesitated. But she unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in. And that small decision would become the final moment of her life that still held the possibility of safety. Because once Whitaker sat down inside the car, the conversation quickly turned into something else. Something darker. Something desperate. And somewhere between the diner parking lot and the empty road outside town, the quiet teacher lost control. What happened inside that car would leave blood on the seat, a body in the dirt, and a secret buried for nearly 2 decades beneath the wide Texas sky. Daniel Whitaker's voice had grown quieter as the story moved closer to the moment everything changed. Detective Marcus Alvarez could feel the tension tightening in the room. For 18 years the case had existed as fragments: blood in a car, a missing woman, a silent stretch of road outside town. Now, piece by piece, the man sitting across from him was beginning to connect those fragments into a single, terrible narrative. Whitaker adjusted his glasses and stared at the floor for a long moment before continuing. "I didn't force her to let me in," he said. Emily unlocked the passenger door. The memories seemed to move slowly through his mind, as if he were watching it from a distance. It was late. She looked tired, but she still smiled the way she used to when she was in my class. The image was painfully ordinary. A young woman sitting behind the wheel of her car in a dimly lit diner parking lot. The hum of the soda machine still buzzing inside the building behind her. The empty road stretching away into the Texas night. Whitaker sitting in the passenger seat. A conversation beginning. At first, he said, they talked the same way they always did. Casually. Emily asked if he had been reading any good books lately. Whitaker mentioned a biography about Abraham Lincoln. The kind of conversation they had shared dozens of times before. But eventually the subject turned back to what she had said inside the diner. Austin. The new job. The idea of leaving town. Whitaker asked her when she planned to move. Emily said maybe a few weeks. She sounded excited. Hopeful. Whitaker said that was the moment something shifted inside him. He felt a sudden panic he couldn't explain. A feeling that everything he had come to depend on was about to vanish. So he asked her something strange. Something that made Emily pause. He asked if she would still visit the diner when she came back to town. Emily laughed softly. "Mr. Whitaker, I don't think I'll be back much," she said. The words weren't cruel. They weren't meant to hurt him. They were simply honest. A young woman talking about moving forward with her life. But Whitaker said the sentence landed in his mind like a door slamming shut. The silence inside the car grew uncomfortable. Emily noticed it. She shifted slightly behind the wheel. "I didn't mean it like that," she said gently. "I'll probably visit my mom sometimes." But Whitaker had already begun spiraling into something darker. He asked why she had never told him she was planning to leave. Emily frowned slightly. "Why would I?" The question was simple, logical, but it exposed the truth Whitaker had been avoiding. In Emily's world, he was just a former teacher, a friendly face at the diner. Nothing more. The connection he believed existed between them was something he had built entirely inside his own mind. Whitaker said he felt embarrassed, humiliated, and suddenly angry. Not at Emily exactly, but at the realization that the small piece of happiness he thought he had found was never really there. The argument started quietly. Whitaker accused her of pretending to care about him. Emily immediately pushed back. She told him he was being ridiculous, that their conversations were just conversations, nothing more. Whitaker said his voice grew louder. Emily became uncomfortable, then nervous. The atmosphere inside the car changed. Emily reached toward the door. "I think you should get out now," she said. Whitaker admitted he didn't move. Instead, he kept talking, trying to explain how lonely he had been, how much it meant to him that she remembered him. Emily listened at first, but the desperation in his voice began to frighten her. She tried to end the conversation again. "Please get out of the car," she said. Whitaker said that was the moment panic completely took control. He reached for her arm. Not violently at first, just enough to stop her from opening the door. But Emily reacted instantly. She pulled away, told him to let go. Whitaker described the next few seconds in a slow, broken voice. "She tried to push me away." The struggle began inside the small space of the car. Emily tried to open the driver's door. Whitaker grabbed her again. She shouted. He tried to silence her. Hands moving, bodies twisting in the narrow seats. Emily fought harder. She reached for something in the car. Whitaker never knew exactly what. Maybe the keys. Maybe her phone. But the movement triggered something in him. Fear. Panic. The instinct to stop the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. And in that moment, Whitaker made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He struck her. Once. Hard. Emily's head snapped sideways. But she was still conscious. Still struggling. Still trying to get away. Whitaker struck her again. And again. The violence escalated in seconds. By the time Whitaker realized what he was doing, Emily Carter had collapsed across the driver's seat. Blood spreading across the upholstery. The car door hanging open. The night outside completely silent. Whitaker said he sat frozen in the passenger seat for several minutes. Unable to move. Unable to understand what had just happened. Because the young woman who had been laughing inside the diner less than an hour earlier was now lying motionless beside him. The realization hit slowly. Emily Carter was dead. Whitaker's breathing grew shallow as he described those moments. "I didn't know what to do," he said. Alvarez's voice remained steady. "So you drove." Whitaker nodded faintly. "Yes." He pushed Emily's body aside, climbed behind the wheel, and began driving into the darkness outside town, toward the one place he believed no one would ever look. The empty property he owned miles away. The quiet land where the wind moved through dry grass, and no neighbors lived close enough to notice headlights in the night. By the time he reached the property, Whitaker's mind had shifted into something mechanical. Something cold. He dragged Emily's body into the field, found a shovel in the back of his truck, and began digging, each movement burying the truth deeper beneath the soil, each shovelful sealing a secret that would remain hidden for nearly 2 decades. Until one day investigators would stand on that same ground, and the land would finally reveal what Daniel Whitaker believed time had erased forever. The room was silent after Daniel Whitaker finished describing the moment Emily Carter stopped moving. Detective Marcus Alvarez had spent most of his career listening to confessions. Some were angry, some were emotional, some were filled with denial or desperate attempts to shift blame. Whitaker's voice was different. Flat, tired, almost reflective, like an old man describing a mistake that had quietly followed him through the years. But there was nothing quiet about what happened next. Because the moment Emily Carter died inside that car, Whitaker crossed a line that would trap him in 18 years of silence and fear. Whitaker's hands rested motionless in his lap as he continued speaking. "I remember the sound of the wind," he said. Alvarez didn't interrupt. Whitaker stared past the detectives toward the bookshelf again, but his eyes looked unfocused now, locked somewhere inside the past. It was loud that night, out on the road. After the struggle ended, Whitaker said he sat inside the car for several minutes, without moving. Emily's body lay across the driver's seat, her hair falling over her face, one arm hanging loosely toward the floor. The smell of blood filled the vehicle. Whitaker described feeling like the entire world had suddenly gone quiet around him. No passing cars. No voices. Just the wind moving through the empty fields outside town. Then reality slowly forced its way back into his mind. Emily Carter was dead, and he was sitting inside a car filled with evidence. Whitaker said his first instinct was to run. Just leave the car. walk away into the darkness. But almost immediately another thought stopped him. The car could be traced. Witnesses had seen him inside the diner. People knew he had been there that night. If the police found the car with Emily inside it, the trail might lead straight back to him. So Whitaker made a decision. A terrible, irreversible decision. He would move the car. Whitaker shifted Emily's body toward the passenger side as best he could. Blood smeared across the seat and the door as he dragged her out of the way. Then he climbed behind the wheel. The engine started with a low rumble that sounded far too loud in the empty night. Whitaker drove out of the diner parking lot and turned toward the county road. Not toward Emily's apartment. Toward the opposite direction. The long rural stretch where the town lights quickly disappeared and darkness swallowed the highway. Whitaker said the drive felt endless. Every pair of headlights in the distance made his heart race. Every passing vehicle felt like a threat. But the road remained mostly empty. Texas nights in small towns often are. Eventually, he reached the dirt road that led toward his property. The tires crunched across loose gravel as the car moved deeper into the empty land. Whitaker turned off the headlights before reaching the tree line. The darkness outside the windshield became almost complete. Only the faint glow of the dashboard illuminated the interior of the car. Emily's body lay beside him in the passenger seat.
Silent. Still.
Whitaker said he could barely breathe. But he kept moving. He parked near the edge of the property where a small cluster of mesquite trees offered some cover. The wind rustled through the dry branches above. Whitaker stepped out of the car and opened the passenger door. Dragging Emily's body from the seat took longer than he expected. Dead weight is heavier than most people imagine. Her arm slipped from his grip once and struck the side of the car. Whitaker froze when the sound echoed into the darkness. But no lights appeared. No voices. The land remained silent. Eventually, he pulled her several yards away from the vehicle. Then he walked back to his truck. Inside the bed of the truck sat an old shovel he used for clearing brush and digging fence posts. Whitaker said he stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Because somewhere deep inside his mind, he understood that the moment he started digging, there would be no way to undo what he had done. The shovel broke the surface of the dry Texas soil with a dull thud. The ground was harder than he expected. Each movement felt slow, heavy, but fear kept pushing him forward. Whitaker dug until the hole was deep enough to hide the body. Not perfect, not professional, just deep enough. When he finished, sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool night air. He dragged Emily's body into the pit. For a moment, he hesitated, looking down at the young woman who had once sat in his classroom years earlier. A student who asked thoughtful questions about history. A student who smiled when she recognized him at the diner. Whitaker said he almost stopped then. Almost walked away. Almost called the police. But the panic was too strong. Too overwhelming. He pushed the dirt back into the hole. Shovelful after shovelful. Until Emily Carter disappeared beneath the soil. Whitaker tamped the ground down with the back of the shovel. Then he scattered dry grass across the surface, trying to make the disturbed earth look natural again. When it was done, the field looked almost exactly as it had before, except now a secret lay buried beneath it. Whitaker drove Emily's car back toward town, but he didn't return it to the diner parking lot. Instead, he left it on the quiet county road where it would eventually be discovered the next morning.
Door open.
Blood visible on the seat. Just enough chaos to create confusion. Then Whitaker walked away. Back to his truck. Back to his house. Back to the quiet life he had lived before that night. Or, at least the life he tried to pretend still existed. For the next 18 years, the town believed Emily Carter had vanished into the darkness. Some people believed she had been abducted. Others thought she might have run away. Theories came and went.
Rumors spread.
But Daniel Whitaker attended church every Sunday. He visited the diner occasionally. He waved politely to neighbors. And the secret remained buried beneath 25 acres of silent Texas land. Until the day investigators began digging. Whitaker lifted his eyes toward Detective Alvarez again. There was no anger in them now, only exhaustion. I told myself it was over, he said quietly. That if no one ever found her, maybe the past would stay where I buried it. The old man paused. Then he shook his head slowly. But the past doesn't stay buried. The words lingered in the air between them, because both men in that room understood the same thing. The secret Whitaker believed would remain hidden forever had finally come back to the surface. And now the entire town would learn what really happened on that cold October night in 2001. Inside the interrogation room at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, the fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over the metal table. On the other side sat Mark Delaney, his hands clasped tightly together. The man who had lived as an ordinary citizen for nearly 3 decades now looked far less composed than before. Detective Laura Jensen placed a thick case file on the table. Inside were the newest pieces of evidence: DNA reports, forensic reanalysis, and fresh statements collected from witnesses who had been questioned decades earlier. "Mark," she said calmly, "we've reviewed every piece of evidence from the 2000 case." He didn't respond. Laura opened the folder and slid an old crime scene photo across the table. It showed the small house on Cedar Street where Sarah Whitmore had been found dead on a cold November morning. "Your DNA," Laura continued evenly, "was found on the towel in the bedroom." Mark shifted slightly. Just a small movement, a quick tightening of his jaw, but it was enough for the investigators watching from the observation room to notice. Detective Miguel Alvarez stepped closer. He placed another document on the table, the comparison results from the National DNA Database. "Not just one sample," Miguel said.
3.
"All of them match." The room fell silent. For 27 years, Mark Delaney had lived only a few streets away from the crime scene. He worked regular jobs, got married, attended neighborhood gatherings. No one had suspected him, until new forensic technology allowed investigators to re-examine evidence that had been sitting in police storage for decades. Laura looked directly at him. "We spoke with Claire Whitmore," she continued, "Sarah's sister. She told us that the night it happened you were the last person to see Sarah alive." Mark swallowed. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Miguel gently pushed the recorder closer to him. "This is your chance," he said quietly. 27 years is a long time to keep a lie." Behind the one-way glass, detectives and prosecutors stood silently watching. They knew this moment could determine the entire case. Mark Delaney stared at the table. Then, for the first time since the interrogation began, he spoke. "You don't understand what really happened that night." Laura said nothing. She simply pressed the record button. Because after nearly 3 decades, the Minnesota cold case was finally beginning to reveal the truth. And if a confession came next, it could change everything. Mark Delaney's voice came out low at first, almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights. "You don't understand what really happened that night." Detective Laura Jensen didn't interrupt. She had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than pressure. In interrogation rooms, people often filled the quiet with things they never intended to say. Mark stared at the metal tabletop, his reflection faint and distorted in its dull surface. 27 years of routine life had built a careful shell around him, a husband, a neighbor, a quiet man who waved politely when he walked his dog down Maple Avenue. But now that shell had begun to crack. Miguel Alvarez leaned back slightly in his chair. "Then help us understand," he said softly. Mark exhaled slowly. For several seconds he said nothing. His fingers rubbed together nervously, over and over, like someone trying to erase an invisible stain. Outside the room, behind the one-way glass, the investigators waited in tense silence. Because after nearly 3 decades of dead ends and frustration, this was the closest anyone had ever come to hearing the truth behind the 2000 Minnesota cold case that had haunted the town. Mark finally looked up. His eyes moved between the detectives, searching their faces, measuring something. "I didn't plan it," he said. The words landed like a small explosion in the room. Neither detective reacted outwardly, but both felt the same surge of adrenaline. Laura spoke carefully. "Tell us what happened." Mark swallowed again. "That night Sarah called me." The name hung heavily in the air. Sarah Whitmore, 23 years old. Friendly, well-liked, the kind of person neighbors described as the one who always smiled. Her murder had shattered the quiet rhythm of Cedar Street in November of 2000. Mark continued slowly, as if pulling each word through thick mud. She needed help moving something, a dresser or something like that. I don't remember exactly. Miguel glanced at Laura briefly. The original case file had recorded a similar detail, a neighbor helping Sarah move furniture earlier that evening. But the neighbor's name had never been confirmed.
Until now.
She lived alone, Mark continued. She didn't have many people she could call. Laura slid another photograph across the table. Sarah's bedroom. The overturned chair. The broken lamp. The dark stain on the carpet that investigators had never forgotten. When you arrived, Laura asked quietly, "What happened?" Mark stared at the picture. For a moment his face twisted with something that might have been regret or fear. We argued. The word came out blunt and heavy. About what? Mark hesitated. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. She accused me of something, said I had been watching her. Laura's eyes sharpened slightly. Had you? Mark shook his head quickly.
No.
I mean, maybe I noticed her sometimes. Everyone did. She lived right across the street. But his voice carried a tremor that suggested the truth was more complicated. Miguel folded his arms. Witnesses said you were seen near her house several nights before the murder. Mark looked down again. I just walked my dog. Silence returned to the room. The detectives let it linger, because the tension itself often pulled more truth to the surface. Finally, Laura spoke again. The DNA evidence puts you inside her bedroom, she said calmly. Your fingerprints were found on the dresser. She called you to move. Mark's shoulders sagged slightly. She started yelling, he muttered. Said she was going to call the police.
Why?
Another pause. Then the answer came almost as a whisper. She thought I broke into her house before. Behind the glass, several investigators exchanged stunned looks. That detail had never appeared in the original police reports. Laura leaned forward. Did you? Mark didn't respond. His breathing grew heavier. You can't hide from this anymore, Miguel said quietly. Mark's hands trembled. I just wanted to talk to her. The room felt colder somehow. She was different, Mark continued. Nice to me, not like everyone else. Laura felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was a familiar pattern in cases like this, obsession disguised as affection. Mark's voice began to crack. She kept yelling, saying she would call the cops, saying she knew I'd been watching her through the window. Laura kept her tone steady. And then, Mark's eyes closed. For a second, I just lost it. The words fell into the silence, like stones into deep water. Outside the room, a detective slowly shook his head. After 27 years, the truth was finally beginning to surface. But it was uglier than anyone had imagined. Mark continued, his voice barely steady. She pushed me. I grabbed the lamp. I didn't mean to. His sentence faded away. But the investigators knew exactly what came next. The broken lamp in the crime scene photos. The blunt force trauma listed in the autopsy report. A violent moment that had stolen a young woman's life in seconds. Laura spoke again, carefully guiding him forward. What happened after that? Mark's breathing grew uneven. She stopped moving. The words came out hollow. The detectives waited. I panicked, Mark whispered. I wiped things down. Tried to clean up. Miguel glanced toward the observation window. The forensic reports had shown partial attempts at cleaning, smudged fingerprints, wiped surfaces. Back in 2000, the technology simply hadn't been advanced enough to recover usable DNA. But now, decades later, it had. And then, Laura asked. Mark's face looked pale under the harsh lights. I left.
Just like that.
He had walked out of the house and disappeared into the quiet Minnesota night, leaving behind a crime scene that would confuse investigators for decades. Miguel spoke softly. You went home. Mark nodded faintly. Across the street. The sheer simplicity of it was almost unbearable. For years, the killer had lived in plain sight, just yards away from the house where Sarah Whitmore died. He attended neighborhood barbecues, shoveled snow in the winter, talked politely with the same neighbors who had mourned Sarah's death. Laura closed the case file slowly. The confession wasn't complete yet, but the truth was finally visible. A secret buried for 27 years had begun to surface under the weight of science, persistence, and time. Mark looked up again, his eyes hollow. "I didn't think anyone would ever know." The words drifted into the quiet room. Outside, the investigators knew the community would soon hear the news. The 2000 Minnesota cold case that had haunted Cedar Street for nearly 3 decades was finally reaching its end. But for Sarah Whitmore's family, the feeling would never be simple relief. Because justice arriving after 27 years still carries the heavy shadow of everything that was lost. And in the silent space between confession and closure, the echoes of that November night still lingered, a reminder that some truths never truly disappear. They only wait buried in the dark until someone finally brings them back into the light. The confession hung in the interrogation room like a heavy fog that refused to lift. Mark Delaney sat motionless, staring down at the cold metal table as if the truth he had just released was something solid lying there between his hands. For 27 years, that truth had been buried beneath quiet routines and ordinary days. Now it had finally surfaced, raw and irreversible. Detective Laura Jensen did not rush the moment. Confessions rarely ended cleanly. They unfolded slowly, layer by layer, as if the mind struggled to let go of a secret that had been carried for far too long. Outside the glass, investigators shifted quietly. A prosecutor had already been called. The recorder continued running. Laura leaned forward slightly. "Mark," she said carefully, "after you left Sarah's house, what did you do?" Mark blinked slowly. For a moment, he seemed almost confused by the question, as if remembering the world outside that night required a separate effort. "I went home," he said again. Miguel Alvarez folded his arms. "And the next morning?" Mark's lips tightened. "I heard the sirens." That detail had always been one of the strange footnotes in the original investigation. Several neighbors had reported seeing Mark standing in his driveway the morning Sarah's body was discovered, watching police cars arrive on Cedar Street. At the time, no one thought much of it. Everyone had been watching. But now the memory took on a darker meaning. "You watched the investigation," Laura said quietly. Mark nodded once. "I didn't think they would find anything." The words sounded almost distant, like someone recalling a strange dream. But the investigators knew better. For years, detectives had returned to the Whitmore case again and again, chasing leads that dissolved into nothing. Witnesses forgot details. Physical evidence degraded. The town slowly tried to move forward, but the case never truly disappeared. The file remained on a shelf at the county sheriff's office, thick with reports and photographs, waiting. Every few years, a new detective would open it. Every few years, the same frustrating conclusion would appear at the end of the report. No suspect identified. Until science changed everything. Miguel slid another document across the table. "This," he said, tapping the paper lightly, "is the genealogical DNA report." Mark looked at it without interest. But that report was the turning point. A small biological sample recovered from the old evidence box had been processed using modern forensic genealogy, the same technique that had solved several high-profile cold cases across the country. The result had produced a distant family match. From there, investigators had built a sprawling family tree stretching across generations. One branch led directly to Mark Delaney. Laura spoke again. "We collected your DNA from the coffee cup you threw away at the diner last week." Mark gave a faint, humorless laugh. "So that's how you got it?" Miguel nodded. "You've been on our radar for months." Mark's shoulders sagged further. In the observation room, the lead prosecutor whispered quietly with another investigator. The evidence was now overwhelming. DNA, witness statements, and now a recorded confession. But even as the legal case solidified, the emotional weight of the story stretched far beyond the courtroom. Because outside the sheriff's office, the town of Cedar Ridge was about to hear news that would reopen a wound almost 3 decades old. Sarah Whitmore's case had become a piece of local folklore, a tragedy whispered about during late-night conversations and remembered every time someone passed the old house on Cedar Street. For years, people had wondered who did it. A stranger? A drifter passing through town? Someone who had vanished long ago? Almost no one had imagined the killer had been living quietly among them all along. Mark Delaney rubbed his forehead slowly. "I should have left town," he murmured. Laura watched him carefully. "But you didn't." Mark shook his head. "No, I thought time would bury it." That belief had guided him for 27 years. Time, distance, and the slow fading of memory. But cold cases have a strange gravity. They pull investigators back again and again. Because somewhere inside every unsolved case lies a simple refusal to accept silence. Miguel leaned forward slightly. Sarah's family never stopped asking questions. Mark's eyes flickered. "Her sister still lives here," Miguel continued. "Claire Whitmore." The name hung heavily in the room. Claire had spent decades attending memorial services, speaking to investigators, and keeping her sister's story alive. Every anniversary of the murder, she placed flowers near the house on Cedar Street. And every year she told reporters the same thing. Someone out there knows what happened. Now, finally, she had been right. Mark looked toward the observation window. Even though he couldn't see through the glass, he seemed to sense the presence of others watching. "They'll hate me," he muttered. Laura didn't soften the truth. "They already do." The blunt honesty settled in the room like dust. Because justice in cases like this never arrived gently. It arrived with headlines, with reporters, with cameras outside courthouse steps, and with a community forced to confront the reality that the monster they feared had been walking quietly beside them for years. Mark sat silently for several moments. Then he whispered something so soft the detectives almost missed it. "I used to see her sister sometimes." Laura's eyes sharpened. "Where?" "At the grocery store, church events around town." Miguel exchanged a quick glance with her. Mark continued, his voice hollow. "She would look at me sometimes like she was trying to remember something." The idea sent a chill through the room. For decades, Claire Whitmore had unknowingly crossed paths with the man who killed her sister. A stranger in the crowd. A quiet face among neighbors. Mark's breathing slowed again. "I kept thinking one day someone would figure it out." Laura closed the folder in front of her. And today they did. The recorder continued spinning softly on the table. Every word captured. Every admission documented. After nearly 3 decades of silence, the Whitmore case had finally broken open. But outside the walls of the interrogation room, the emotional storm had only just begun. Soon the news would spread across Cedar Ridge. Neighbors would gather in small groups, stunned. Old memories would return. And one quiet street, Cedar Street, would once again become the center of a story that refused to fade. Inside the room, Mark Delaney lowered his head into his hands. For years he had lived inside the illusion that time erased crimes, that secrets eventually dissolved into history. But cold cases do not disappear. They wait, patiently, in dusty evidence boxes, in forgotten photographs, in the quiet determination of investigators who refuse to close a file without answers. And on this night, after 27 years, the truth had finally walked back into the light. But for the Whitmore family, the ending of the mystery would never erase the beginning of the nightmare. Because some crimes echo far beyond the moment they happen. They echo through decades, through memories, through entire communities. And long after the confession ends, the silence that follows can feel even heavier than the years that came before.